Israel is barring dozens of international aid agencies from providing help in Gaza. This includes Doctors Without Borders and CARE and the eminent Norwegian Refugee Council.
Started in this movement as the labor organizer for Amazon, but I wanted to connect all struggles. As my sister Nancy said, in the labor movement, as a trade unionist, we take a pledge, and our pledge is to the working class, and that doesn't exclude Palestinians. But unfortunately, a lot of our labor leadership in this country specifically have forgotten their oath that they took in. They've forgotten their fabric of their unions, which is an injury to one is an injury to all.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. We begin with what should be a shocking story. Israel is barring dozens of international aid agencies from providing help in Gaza. This includes Doctors Without Borders and CARE and the eminent Norwegian Refugee Council. The excuse is these groups have not submitted a plan to obey new Israeli rules. The test for all this was UNRWA. Israel invented a cock-and-bull story that it was a tool of Hamas and then pressed this on the ever-willing Trump administration. Republicans and Democrats made it illegal for the U.S. to send money to UNRWA, depriving 1 million people, 1 million refugees of food, education, and health care. Now Israel goes after the next tier of groups helping Palestinians. Now, if you think this is just a matter of obeying reasonable rules, the Associated Press article mentions this. The new regulations included ideological requirements, including disqualifying organizations that have called for boycotts against Israel, denied the October 7th attack, or expressed support for any of the international court cases against Israeli soldiers or leaders. The AP article notes some aid groups say they didn't submit the list of Palestinian staff as Israel demanded for fear that they would be targeted by Israel. If that sounds like a slander against Israel, consider the fact that the Israeli military has already killed 500 aid workers in Gaza. This shocking story is not getting much coverage in the corporate press because the U.S. government has normalized genocide, and not only in Palestine. Here's a headline from July. Cuts to the USAID program may result in the deaths of 14 million people by 2030. 14 million lives extinguished. The Washington Post article was based on a study in the distinguished British medical journal, The Lancet. The mass deaths have already started. Cuts to the emergency program to combat AIDS have resulted in the deaths of over 150,000 people. The whole Netanyahu story about the supposed Hamas penetration of aid organization helps disguise Netanyahu's whole own arrogance and incompetence. Netanyahu massively supported Hamas before October 7th. Yes, you heard that right. He supported Hamas. He did this because he believed having a strong Hamas would weaken the Palestinian community. It would divide it. It would make even a tiny Palestinian state impossible. Netanyahu allowed in over $1 billion into Gaza from Qatar straight to Hamas with no strings attached. This was all covered by the Israeli media right after October 7th. And we wrote about it in our website. Netanyahu isn't a hypocrite, he's a master hypocrite. His pious complaints about the charities are pure theater. It was revealed just this week that Israel had urged an increase of money from Qatar to Hamas just a month before the October 7th, 2023 attack. Go to our website, thestrugglevideo.org, and click on this tab for more information. We're happy to report that Egyptian activist Alaa Abd el-Fattah has made it out of Egypt and is now in Britain, where he also has citizenship. In 2023, our parent group, the Middle East Crisis Committee, gave el-Fattah our Courage Award. He had been in prisons of the al-Sisi regime on and off for about 12 years. Al-Sisi freed him last September. Predictably, the far right in Britain found reason to raise a fuss. They found some objectionable tweets from 10 or 15 years ago and also posted without context sarcastic words he had said to mock idiocy. And then the far right demands his deportation. Naomi Klein, who wrote the foreword to his "You Have Not Yet Been Defeated," stands behind him, as does the Middle East Crisis Committee of Connecticut. For his reaction, which included an apology for some of the tweets, scan this QR code or go to freeallah.net. Five years ago, we interviewed Chris Smalls. At a time he was organizing the very first trade union at an Amazon warehouse. He has since become very involved in the cause for Palestine. Last September and the start of October, he took part in the Global Sumud Flotilla. He spoke with Palestinian-American Huwaid Araf on December 18th in Hartford at a fundraiser for Eyewitness Palestine.
So I'm going to invite up a brother that you may have seen recently, you may have heard of through his work creating the Amazon Labor Union, or being on the Handala, illegally arrested, or kidnapped, I should say is the right word, kidnapped by the IOF off of the Handala, beaten by seven IOF, or I should just say Israelis, and released. Please make some noise for Chris Smalls.
Thank you, Sister Nancy, and thank you all for being here tonight and inviting me back to Connecticut. And I say back because I actually lived here for 1 year. I actually opened up the Amazon warehouse here in Windsor, 2017, BDL2. That was my second building as an assistant manager. So this is sort of like home. I lived in Ellington, actually, for those who don't know. So I'm glad to be back in this space and talk about my recent actions, and not only talk about that, but talk about a little bit of my background for those who don't know how I got into the movement. Yeah, I'm sorry. Is that good? Can y'all hear me now? Yeah. All right, yeah. As my sister Nancy said, a lot of people know me for my work with forming the first union for Amazon workers in this country. I was an assistant manager for 5 years. I opened up 3 warehouses in the tri-state area. New Jersey was my first one. Connecticut was my second one in 2017. and JFK Staten Island, 2018 to 2020. I was fired in 2020 when I led a walkout during COVID-19. As y'all remember, we were deemed essential workers. Amazon workers specifically were deemed the closest thing to the Red Cross, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. As an assistant manager who spent 60, 70 hours with workers, especially during these times, which is holiday season, I knew that wasn't right. I knew that wasn't just for us. We're human beings like everybody else, and we can't be the closest thing to the Red Cross when we're talking about a deadly virus, especially before the vaccine. So after that walkout, I was fired by somebody who y'all may know well, who was considered the richest man in the world at the time, Jeff Bezos, the owner and the CEO, former CEO of Amazon. And I like to say that I think I added to him resigning from the CEO position in 2020. For those who don't know, he did resign that year, the same year when we led this walkout, because I believe there was so much pressure and so much controversy around that it was his best interest to resign. Even though that's not really the sentiment, because he still owns about 75% of the company and still contributes to a lot of their decision making till this day. His hands is definitely all over this genocide as well. The AWS web services is the intelligence that's being used to target and kill innocent Palestinians, for those who don't know. Also, Amazon, along with Google, Microsoft, Starlink, these tech companies have invested billions of dollars, $7.2 billion to be exact, in a project called Project Nimbus, which is AKA Project the dark gray cloud, where once again is the intelligence that is being used to power the Iron Dome, the intelligence that's being used to power the technology that the military uses. But at the time, I didn't know that, Many people didn't know that as well. Started in this movement as the labor organizer for Amazon, but I wanted to connect all struggles. As my sister Nancy said, in the labor movement, as a trade unionist, we take a pledge, and our pledge is to the working class, and that doesn't exclude Palestinians. But unfortunately, a lot of our labor leadership in this country specifically have forgotten their oath that they took in. They've forgotten their fabric of their unions, which is an injury to one is an injury to all. And most importantly, they really forgot what their responsibility is. And I say responsibility because once you sign up to be a trade unionist, you're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting on behalf of the working class. And representation. I always tell my organizers, when people ask you, what are you fighting for? You say representation. And I saw this happen with Amazon workers during COVID, that we didn't have a voice because Amazon was spending millions of dollars to crush campaigns, crush workers' voices. But I broke through the veil because Jeff Bezos, who was making $13 billion a day, $9 million an hour, $5,000 a second, decided to have a smear campaign on little old me. And in that meeting, with his top general counsel, they said to make me the face of the whole unionizing efforts against Amazon, but also, ironically, they rather answer those type of questions than answer questions about health and safety, signed by Jeff Bezos. That conversation was leaked to the media by somebody in that room. And that also is a stigma in the Black community, calling us not smart or articulate. It's something that corporate models use for decades. They use these stigmas so that when media come talking to workers, that it's not credible, that we're not smart enough to talk about workplace issues or any issue. And that is something that not just corporations use, but billionaires, even our governments. They use these type of tactics to suppress our voices, to silence us. But obviously that didn't happen, because when that leak combo came out, it motivated me to continue my advocacy, even though I no longer worked at the company. So fast forward, after I was fired, I started a nonprofit called the Congress of Essential Workers, a collective of all essential workers from different sectors in the private sector and the public sector, different organizations from climate injustice to social injustice to women's rights to children's and gun rights. All of these different orgs came together during the pandemic, and we traveled and protested in front of every Jeff Bezos mansion from the East Coast to the West Coast. We did this for about a year and a half, and then in 2021, I decided to go back to the same building that fired me in Staten Island, JFK, and founded the Amazon Labor Union in April of 2021. My campaign, and I like to say that I was an inspiration to these encampments with the students, because I put together an encampment outside the same facility that fired me. My encampment was up for over 300 days. Every day I was outside at this public bus stop right across the street from the building, talking to workers as they came to and from work, trying to convince them and educate them on what a union is, and to join our independent worker-led union, which was the Amazon Labor Union at the time. Very difficult campaign, because Amazon spent over $20 million trying to stop me. And this was before we had any major backing from any union. Nobody believed in us. We had no politician help, no political support. And pretty much we were a grassroots, scrappy group of people, individuals with all different backgrounds that came together to fight against this $2.2 trillion company, which was deemed unorganizable at the time, because Amazon has been around for 30 years, ununionized in this country. And that is because they have been able to successfully crush workers' voices, as I mentioned. But we proved them wrong. We brought people together, we educated them, and we've proven that we can take down the richest man in the world and one of the most richest and powerful companies in the world by bringing people together for one common goal. The same thing that we are seeing now when it comes to the struggles for Palestine. We have already won the public opinion around the world. Countries, millions of people from around the world are coming together for one common cause. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It's never going to be handed to us. We're never going to wake up one day and politicians or our governments are going to say, you know what, we're going to put an end to this genocide just because. Everything that we have in this society, we have to fight for. The same thing when it comes to workers' rights. And our campaign was a catalyst and a resurgence to the labor movement in this country, and actually all around the world. Has it resonated on April 1st, not April Fool's Day, in 2022, when we voted in to become the first union in American history. Millions of workers were inspired. Millions of people were paying attention, but that didn't mean the fight was over. It just meant that it just begun. So fast forward 3 years later, a lot of people want to know, how did I get involved with the struggle for Palestine? Well, actually 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to do a panel discussion with Dr. Mustafa, I'm a butcher, Balgoude, yeah, my man's. And we did this panel discussion in Montreal at Concordia University. And that's when I learned about the history of Nakba, learned about the history of trade unions, the resistance, and how trade unions always stood hand in hand with the resistance since the first Nakba. And he also invited me to go to Palestine to do some humanitarian work. He invited me to Jerusalem to work with his organization. But unfortunately, that never happened. The genocide had started less than a year later, October 7th, as everybody know. But we know that this really didn't start, it just restarted. they never really stopped killing Palestinians. We all know this. And once this genocide had begun, I was actually in one of the largest Palestinian diasporas in the world. I was in Berlin, Germany. And I remember recording videos of my experience there as I saw the Nazi police kettle in the Palestinian community, tear children away from their families, their parents, arrest them, put them in zip ties, drag them away from their parents, arrest Palestinians for no reason, tear down Palestinian flags. And every protest that I attended, we weren't even allowed to say Free Palestine. The police kettled every protest, and as soon as any activist said Free Palestine, they were dragged away and arrested violently, right in front of me. And I shared this experience on my Instagram and on my social media, and overnight, I lost over 10,000 followers. People instantly said, we supported your work when you was organizing Amazon workers, but this is where I draw the line. And I couldn't believe the amount of DMs that I received from people, the amount of messages I received from people that were trying to discourage me from even speaking out about this issue. And that's when I knew that I had to double down and do the complete opposite. And not only did I, if I wasn't in the church right now, I'll tell you what I really said. But you can imagine it was along the lines of forget you. And, I felt that was a familiar feeling. The same feeling we had when we took on Amazon, when people said, you guys are a circus, or you guys will never be able to defeat this company. You guys are a waste of time. You guys are a dumpster fire. And I heard all of these things when people didn't believe in us. And that's the same feeling I had when people wrote me off for speaking out about Palestine. And so I said, you know what? Not only am I going to double down, I'm going to make sure I'm pioneering. I joined some of the students' encampments. I was at Columbia University day one, week one, and I ended up on Canary Mission. No surprise. And I wear that with a badge of honor as a labor leader in this country, because our labor unions and our labor movement, and I say the majority of our labor movement, because there are some rank and files and locals who absolutely stand with Palestine, but our leadership and the majority of our labor unions in America have been complicit for the last 2 years. And as a labor leader, I'm proud to say that I'm not only one on Canary Mission, but also banned from Israel for 100 years. So, and I get to thank who I call my GOAT now, Hueda, my sister, for that badge of honor, because how I ended up on the Freedom Flotilla, I'll never forget the conversation. I was trying to get on once, like many others were inspired by, with Madeleine, with Greta Thunberg and Diego and Yasmin and all of the other great activists that were on there that got a lot of attention over the summer. I was inspired, and I said, how can I get on to the next mission? Didn't expect it to be that soon, but I was reaching out however I could to get to the Freedom Flotilla. I filled out the application, but of course they have a backlog of 30,000 or even more than that. So I was asking journalists, and then finally one journalist who interviewed Hueda put me in touch. And I remember she called me up and said, we're leaving in 2 days. I said, you know what? Sign me up without hesitation. And I like to tell people the truth. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't even tell my union, because I knew that folks were going to try to talk me out of this mission. But it wouldn't have mattered whether I told them or not, because if they know me, they know I was going to do it anyway. But the only conversation I did have was with my children. being a father of 4 and knowing that I'm fighting not just for my children, I don't want them to grow up in a world where they have to go on their Instagram and see innocent children, men, women, being slaughtered. I don't want them to have to grow up in a world where they can't go to work and speak up about health and safety concerns without being targeted and retaliated against. And I damn sure don't want them to grow up in a world where we're living with normalizing genocide and normalizing the killing of innocent people. So as a father, as a black man, as a trade unionist, as a labor leader, and most importantly, as an American citizen whose taxpaying dollars is going towards this genocide, those were the reasons why I decided to jump on the flotilla. I wanted to spread more awareness. I wanted to reach different spaces. I wanted to reach different audiences. And I wanted to break down another stigma that was floating around, especially within the black community. Because it was a stigma that still is, because I see the comments every day and I see the comments online, that black people should sit this one out, that the fight for Palestine is not black people's fight. And I said, heard that before too. During George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Black Lives Matter movement 5 years ago, wasn't that long ago, they told black people to sit this fight out. It's time for white people to step up. And I said, that didn't come from black people. None of these stigmas, whether you're not smart or articulate, whether you're black or brown, indigenous, immigrant, when they say your job is bad, just quit, jump into another fire, that's not words that are coming from the community. These are stigmas that are being placed upon us from our oppressors and our opposition.
More of his talk next week. That's our program for today. I'm Stanley Heller for the Struggle Video News.